everyone. So today's lesson is going to be on supply and demand, and I'm going to apologize right off the bat because the pictures that I have on the screen are just from the textbook. I wasn't able to find the pictures that I really wanted, so I apologize because they're looking a little bit crude, but hopefully it will get the job done. So what we're going to be talking about is another aspect of business owners that they have to pay attention to, which is supply and demand. So supply basically means the amount of product that the business owners are willing to supply or create for customers. And then the demand is how much customers will demand or want the product. So as you can see here, supply and demand are typically these kind of like curves, supply being a positive curve and demand being kind of like a negative curve. And they work in tangency, meaning that they work together. And you usually look at supply and demand in regards to the quantity. So the quantity that is supplied or demanded, and the price. So the price or the cost of how much it costs to produce the product, and then the price that you're actually going to set your product at and people are willing to pay. Okay. Now, when these two lines intersect, they are called equilibrium. Now, this is the ideal point that business owners want to aim for, because the equilibrium price is going to be where supply and demand are equal. So you are supplying the exact amount of product that people are demanding. And so there's not going to be a surplus, there's not going to be a shortage, everyone is happy. So the customers are happy because they have their product, and you as a business owner are happy because you are selling all of your products. And so equilibrium price is exactly what you want to aim for. Now, as you know, supply and demand always are constantly changing, right? Because the business owners are probably constantly either choosing to produce more or less of a product, and people are either going to demand more or less of a product depending on the season, depending on how much money they have, depending on the price of the product, and so forth. So supply and demand, although these are stagnant pictures, like a picture in time, will constantly be changing or evolving based on all of these different external factors and internal factors as well. Okay. So let's look at different scenarios in regards to supply and demand and what that would mean. So on this picture here, I know it's a lot, but what we're going to be looking at is you see the supply and the demand curve. I circled where equilibrium is. Now, this is not what equilibrium is at right now, though. So the price is set to $7, and that might be a number that the business owner has determined that they want to sell their product at, and they are hoping that the $7 is going to be equilibrium. Unfortunately, $7 is not reaching equilibrium. What's happening is that they are having a supply surplus. What that means is that there is not enough demand for their product, and they're not able to sell all of their products. So they're actually losing money here. They're having products sit on their shelves and it's not selling. And so demand is actually lower than supply right now. And so what's going to happen is the business owners are going to either stop producing those items, meaning that they're not going to produce any more or create any more. And so therefore what's there will eventually sell, or they're going to most likely reduce the price. And so this is where you see different sales prices, like you might see like a reduced price. So if you think about, like, for instance, Target, they have sales all the time on their clothes, and maybe what they've determined is they come out with a brand new shirt and they realize that as the shirt is sitting on the shelves in, the weeks or months that it's there, it's not selling. And so what's going to happen is they're going to reduce the price or have these short sales where the price is going to be lowered. And so then therefore people are more willing to spend money on that shirt. And so the business owners are going to be happier because they're going to sell more. And the consumers are going to be happy because they're not having to pay as much. And so Really, the $7 is kind of like one of those things where business owners have to be very, very aware of what's going on in the market and their product. You don't want it to sit for too long, but you also don't want to demand so little that you don't have enough, which is going to be into our next scenario. So the next scenario is kind of the opposite of what happened, right? So I circled equilibrium here. The price was set to $3. And so what's happening here is $3 was too little, meaning that there's a supply shortage. People are like, dang, that t-shirt's only $3. Oh my gosh, I'm going to totally buy that t-shirt. And so demand is actually higher than what's being supplied or produced of that product. And so what's going to happen is the business owners are going to be like, dang, people really like this product, so I'm going to bring the price up. And so naturally the price will increase. And so therefore it's going to get closer and closer to equilibrium. Okay. So, these are kind of like the ebb and flow of the supply and demand curve, is that business owners might set a specific price, realize it's too low or too high, and then they're going to adjust accordingly. And it's a constant adjustment. And that's why you'll see different sales that are happening throughout the year. You'll also see different, things that are going on or promotions that are going on throughout the year of a business. Okay. So that's really supply and demand curve and kind of how they work interchangeably. Now, business owners also have to think about something called expenses. Now, if you are familiar with expenses, expenses are basically what they have to think about when they're setting price, right? Because you obviously want to know how much you're going to spend on a product before you set your price, okay? And so that's what we're going to talk about next. Okay, so expenses are really important for business owners to really have a good grasp on and know exactly what they're spending for their product. And so there's two different types of expenses that business owners will look at. One is variable costs and the other one is fixed costs. So variable costs are costs that will constantly change the more and more you produce them. So they will probably increase over time. Fixed costs are a one-time deal, meaning that it's only going to cost you this one specific time. So we're going to look at two different examples in regards to fixed and variable costs. The first example being a lemonade stand, and those of you that did this project might be familiar with it. But if we were creating a lemonade stand, some fixed costs here could be, for instance, your cooler to keep your lemonade cold, a table where you put your lemonade cups on, a sign to advertise your lemonade, a chair for you to sit, and maybe the pitcher to actually pour the lemonade in. These are one-time expenses, okay? So I will never spend, or I won't have to spend more the more lemonade I sell. Like, I'm not going to have to buy another cooler or another table if I sell more lemonade. They are one-time deals, okay? And then you have your variable expenses, and your variable expenses are things that will increase depending on how much you sell of your product. So for instance, we might have ice, lemons, water, sugar, cups, and straws. So these are things that would increase, meaning that I'd have to spend more money on buying more lemons or more water or more sugar to make more lemonade, right? And so variable expenses are going to be something that we have to really take into account the more and more we produce. And usually what happens in businesses is that the more and more you produce of a product, the less and less your expenses cost, because of those fixed costs not being necessarily as hurtful on your bottom line. Okay, so essentially we add up our fixed and our variable costs, and that will give us our total expenses. Okay, now how does this relate to when we're looking at specific equations and things like that? Because this is just kind of tangible products of listing them. Okay, so let's look at example 2. So example 2 is specifically, we have some art students who are going to try to determine their expenses on the product that they are going to be making, okay? And so what they've determined is, based on all of their items, they have these fixed expenses, and the fixed expenses are those one-time deal. And so the fixed expenses here are $17,000. So whatever they need, so maybe it would be easels, paint, maybe a room, the easel, the paintbrushes, or things like that that would be fixed, a one-time deal, is going to cost them $17,000. And then each item will cost an additional $5 to produce it. What that means is that we might have to buy a little bit more paint each time, or we might have to buy a little bit more paper or canvases or things like that. But they've determined that it's going to cost them $5 more to produce each individual product that they're selling. Okay, so essentially your expense equation would be your fixed expenses plus your variable expenses. So your fixed expenses being the $17,000, and then your variable expenses being the $5. And we have to put 5 next to a variable, thus it being a variable expense, right? Because this is the quantity that's produced. So it's going to be $5 for each one that we produce, right? And so if I produced 100, I'd have to do 5 times 100, which would give me $500. And those would be the variable costs plus my fixed costs. And so you can see that as we get larger and larger quantities, the expenses are actually going to reduce a little bit more, because what's going to happen is we're going to sell more. And so that's going to go into our revenue function, which is what we're going to be talking about next. Okay, so the last thing that business owners really need to talk about when it comes to supply and demand is this idea of revenue, right? How much money are they going to actually be getting back into, okay? So we're going to talk also about profit in our next lesson, but let's talk about revenue for now. So revenue is essentially the price times the quantity sold. So the price of the product, so the sales price that you're going to charge the customer times the quantity sold, okay? And then when we get into profit, then it's going to be revenue minus expenses, right? So we want to know our revenue as well as our expenses, because that's going to help us determine the profit and how much we're actually going to make. But that's, again, next lesson. So let's look at this first example. So demand for product A is Q is equal to negative 200p plus 40,000. What is the revenue equation? Okay, so the quantity demanded for a specific product represents negative $200 times the price plus the $40,000. Okay, and this is determined a number of different reasons, but kind of hang with me here. And so revenue is going to be price times quantity. So we don't know what the price is of our product yet. We don't know what we want to determine prices. So we're going to do P times Q, and Q happens to be this expression, the negative 200p plus 40,000. So we're going to times P with that. And you'll notice that revenue now becomes a quadratic function. It's negative 200p squared plus 40,000p. So our revenue equation is actually going to be like this upside down parabola, right? This kind of like hill, as you think of, okay? And with that, what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to determine what our maximum revenue is and what price we should set our product at. And so this is kind of why we wait for price, because we want to make sure that we can see how much we're going to be doing for our function, okay? So here's example B. So what is the price and the maximum revenue for product A? So here's the thing. When we do this, we need to use Desmos. Now, you don't have to use Desmos here, but Desmos is a lot more user-friendly in this unit. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that revenue function, the negative 200p squared plus 40,000p, and we're going to enter that into Desmos, okay? So when we enter into Desmos, couple things. Notice that the p's change to x's, and then also the 40,000 has no commas. Super important to not have any commas when we put this in Desmos. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change the window so that we can see this graph. So you'll notice that I go up to, a lot higher of values than I would normally go up to. So I'm at, I think, 3 million here for the y-axis and out to 600 for the x. So you do have to kind of enlarge your window to see this. But you'll see that here, in fact, is that upside down parabola I was talking about. And the very peak point of that upside down parabola is what we want to look for, or what we're really aiming for, because the x coordinate of that top point is going to be the price that will guarantee us our maximum revenue. Now, Usually, our maximum revenue will also produce our maximum profit, but not always. And so, what we would do if we were a business, we would say, okay, I am going to set my prices at $100 per item. And we're hoping that that's going to be equilibrium. Now, obviously, based on the previous slides that we looked at, if our price is too high or too low, we can adjust accordingly. But we know that at this price, we could produce 2 million in revenue, which is really, really awesome. Okay. And so we can use this revenue equation to essentially help us figure out what is the price and the maximum revenue for product A. And again, that price is going to be $100 and the revenue will be $2 million. Okay, I know this video is a little bit longer. I apologize, but I hope that it helped you figure out what is a revenue equation or function, what is an expense equation or function, and how does supply and demand work in regards to businesses. I look forward to seeing you in Zoom, and have a great rest of your day.